Richie James Jr. kind of in that boat with Ross Dwelly of people that always make plays when given the opportunity. They just don't get many opportunities. And it seems like he should be next in line to be the number 3 receiver, but he's competing with Jawan Jennings and Mohamed Sanu. Do you think that Richie James is being given a fair opportunity to win the number 3 job?
I'm not sure if I would say that he's not being given a fair opportunity. It's maybe I'm going to kind of go in circles here with my answer, but I think that there's something, I don't know what it is about Kyle Shanahan where he doesn't like Richie James or feel like Richie James can handle the job.
Right.
Because every time he does get put into the game and is given the opportunities, he's producing. And it's really odd that he's constantly kind of like the 4th or 5th man on the totem pole who doesn't get a chance until somebody else fails or somebody else gets hurt, and then they bring him in, and then he produces. And I really don't understand it at all, because he's a guy, when you look at his numbers from last year, his numbers are better than Deebo Samuel in a lot of ways when it comes to being a wide receiver. I mean, Deebo Samuel's great with the ball in his hands, but his average yard per target last year route was, I think, 2.1 yards or something like that compared to Richie James. And James is, over 17 yards per reception. And when you look at his target numbers, he's targeted at, under 5 yards and, between 5 to 20 and over 20, whereas Deebo Samuel doesn't have a single target last year over 20 yards.
Oof.
And 30 something of his 44 targets were under 5 yards.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what's going on here is Kyle Shanahan has a very specific vision for what Richie James does in his offense, and it may be too limited. Like, I think he feels that he can't beat the press on the outside. So he's trying to get him, in the slot, in bunch sets where he gets free releases. But at the same time, I don't think he really wants him doing much work over the middle in the box. I think he wants him outside the numbers and deep. So I think he's sort of limiting Richie James Jr. maybe more than he should be limited.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with it. I think there's some, and it's, maybe Kyle being stubborn in a way, because he has his type, and Richie James really isn't his type. Right. Of number 3 receiver. And so because of that, he's not getting the fair shake that he deserves.
I think they probably signed him, drafted him to be a returner. He's a better receiver than a returner. But I think the way I think of him is like Taylor Gabriel, that role in Shanahan's offense from 5 years ago. I mean, a guy that isn't necessarily your possession receiver on third down, isn't a classic slot receiver in that sense, but as an outside receiver or a deep threat in 3 receiver sets on first down and a play action attack, I mean, he's a handful. If he's the guy the defense is least concerned about, and if they lose track of him for 1 second, it's an 80-yard touchdown. I don't see why you wouldn't get him on the field more.
Yeah, that Taylor Gabriel, that's a really good call, because that's actually a name that I was thinking of.
Yeah.
For that, because he had a very strong season with Kyle Shanahan in 2015 and 16. And so you think that he'd be able to find some ways to get James the ball more often on a regular basis.
Now, let me give Kyle Shanahan some credit, because in the sense that we say he knows, or he's too concerned with Richie James' limitations, he's very aware of his players' limitations. And I think a lot of the offense is built with Jimmy Garoppolo's limitations in mind. They don't throw down the field at all. And Richie James Jr. is such a downfield threat. Maybe when Trey Lance takes over, we'll see more Richie James, because they're a good matchup. They're a good pairing.
Yeah, that could be the case, and that could be part of why when James was given the chance to play this year, he did, because he wasn't playing with Jimmy Garoppolo. He was primarily playing with Nick Mullins, who, whatever you want to say about Mullins and the issues that he had, he was definitely somebody that pushed the ball down the field more often.
No doubt, which is probably what led to some of the interceptions, but that's what Nick Mullins does. He pushes the ball down the field. He used the players differently. You look at Brandon Ayuk's numbers. A lot of that was with Nick Mullins. I wonder what Ayuk's going to look like with Jimmy Garoppolo, because there's only so much you can do within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, and I really think that's Brandon Ayuk is a guy who really needs to have Jimmy Garoppolo not win this job, because he needs to have that.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
He needs
from
to
that
have
perspective,
that ability to get downfield.
From that perspective, a lot of players in this offense should be rooting for Trey to win this job.
Yeah, because it's one thing to have those downfield shots that are shot plays, right, where they're designed and the quarterback's going there. It's another thing to have those just kind of organically come out of the play, and that's what they really have missed with Garoppolo.
Keneal Mason says maybe it's size. Kyle might want that third wide receiver to be a big possession red zone threat. I think that's probably what it is. He's got these types. He wants Sanu, Kendrick Bourne, young Sanu, and he's hoping Juwan Jennings will be that player. But on first and second down, what Juwan Jennings going to do for you? I'd rather have Richie James on the field.
I agree. And that's kind of what we were talking about. It's the type, and he's looking for the big guy. That's also, I think, part of what draws them to Jalen Hurd if Jalen Hurd's healthy.
Right.
And if Jalen Hurd's healthy, I think this discussion changes a little bit because he does bring so much more to the table of possibilities if he's healthy. But
absolutely. So I think a realistic expectation for Richie James is to probably platoon with whoever that big slot receiver is, whether it's Hurd, Jennings. On first and second down, James should be on the field. On third down in the red zone, it would make sense to take out the 5'9" receiver and put in someone like 6'3" Juwan Jennings. I see that, but they're probably going to platoon. I would hope they better. I would like to see more playing time for Dwelly and Richie James this year. I think we can make it happen.
Yeah, those two guys definitely. All those targets that went to the other tight end last year need to definitely go to somebody else. Because, I'd like to see Dwelly get at least half of those, as a bump up because he deserves it.
Jordan Reed got a bunch of targets last year for a guy who didn't do much, so there's going to be a lot of targets distributed.